Welcome to Identiverse 2026. I'm Mike Shema. Joining me today is Neha Duggal, Chief Product Officer at P0 Security. Neha, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, talk to you.
I hope you're still excited because we're going to have to talk about agents. We're going to have to talk about problems we've had for 20 years.
No, what are agents?
I know, I'm sorry, but let me see if I can frame it this way to kick things off.
Sure.
A lot of the conversations are about the agent's gone rogue. Here's a prompt injection, here's a malicious skill. But that's not necessarily just a prompt injection itself, isn't the real problem, or at least I don't think it is. I think you've got a very more nuanced aspect here to tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loves to talk about rogue agents, and everybody likes to talk about, how in multiple different ways agent can take malicious actions.
Right.
But I think from my perspective, from what I'm looking at it as I speak to customers, and as I talk to folks that are actually deploying agents into production or even following the news, it's not the rogue agents that, yes, they should be a part of your worry. But in most of the cases, what you're actually seeing is agents just trying to do their job, and inadvertently, because of the way they are given permissions to do their job, they'll try and break every barrier to ensure they get their job done. So whether, you know, uh, again, privilege abuse, agents don't have a conscience, so they can't sit and sort of evaluate what that looks like. So in my opinion, I say yes, worry about your rogue agents, but worry about your naive agents that can actually inadvertently cause massive destruction. If you follow the news, like, in the last few months, we've heard about Pocket OS, where again, the whole database was dropped along with replicas. Happened previously with, other companies as well. And in each of these cases, it wasn't a malicious agent. It was just an agent trying to do its job, was over permission, and did everything in its power to go fix the problem. And that, again, led to massive data loss. So yeah, when you're thinking about these agents, like, yes, rogue agents, but think more broadly beyond what agents can do, and again, what they should be allowed to do.
And I love that framing because it highlights what's so important. The question isn't like point and laugh, oh, look, it deleted a database. What prompted it to do that? It's more of why did it have the permissions to delete the database in the first place?
Exactly.
And that's but that feels like, this is not because you said it, but that feels like such a boring story. It's hard to convince like security folks that do that. So yeah, help me make that story more interesting. Is there a way to do that?
I mean, I think inherently humans are like attracted to the oohs ahs, like, and that's why I think the rogue agent stuff gets. But it's all these mundane sort of things in life that you need to care about more, and in the case of agents as well, because the risk that these pose to your organization are way more massive, and again, it's something that can happen to anybody at any time. So again, thinking about some of these things is important. Might be boring, but that's life. You got to think of these things, and in a lot of these cases, a lot more important because the consequences are massive.
Yes, and I'll argue, only half jokingly, a boring day for the incident response team is probably a good day because you did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't think cybersecurity would have too many problems embracing boring.
Yeah.
But to get to that boring, to belabor that topic a little bit, so there's that extreme case that's fun. That rogue agent, delete the database, that's bad. There are still organizations that are rolling out agents and trying to figure out how to do this right. But I suspect that there's humans in the loop, to use that phrase, approve this, or they should do this. How do you get beyond, or how does an organization get beyond approvals for agent actions without burning someone out or boring someone to death, just hitting yes, this is okay?
I mean, human approvals for regular for agent actions, for things the agent's supposed to do anyways, I think it's a no-go from the get-go.
Why bother?
Because that just slows down what agents are supposed to do. You're bringing in agents to improve the productivity, in some cases increase velocity, and doing something like that may sort of hamper again, the speed. And you would probably see pushback from folks that are actually developing agents say, hey, I do not want that. So I think security teams have to be thinking about how can they bring in guardrails in place, the right guardrails in place, so you're not slowing down
Yeah.
productivity of your organization, but still have so human in the loop, yes, makes sense, and it should absolutely be there, especially when agents trying to do something destructive, like write into a database or
There we go.
drop something or like delete something from your Salesforce instance, for example. I truly think, and we've seen this in multiple customer conversation, for sensitive actions, if you will, yes, there should be some sort of foresight. There should be some escalation mechanism in place, so agents are, again, do not have the access, or don't even get to the point where they have the capability of destroying
Right.
something. But I think for the use cases that are well understood, for like a predictable, like, okay, from an agent perspective, what it's expected to do,
Hmm.
using, again, you should have tools and guardrails in place that can help evaluate the context on what the agent's trying to do, who's trying to take that action
Yeah.
with the agent, should be able to evaluate that and be allowed to be given the right sort of privileges when it needs them, so they can still do their action without introducing that friction of like, hey, every action must be approved by a
Yeah, and
specific user.
that theme of bother the human when it's
What
important or when it be a consequential, not
Yep,
just for the
not just for.
mundane things that
Yep.
are boring, but that's what agents will do. They'll do a whole lot of boring things on their own and give
Yeah.
us time to do more interesting stuff.
Velocity is more of the essence when it
Yeah.
comes from an agent perspective. So I think in the case of agentic, it's you have to be cautious of, like, you're not slowing the system down,
Hmm.
but from a security perspective, still have the guardrails to ensure that the agent is behaving or is sort of doing actions within the confines of what should be normal behavior, and anything outside of that is flagged for explicit approval.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I want to riff on that idea of the guardrails that you've mentioned, and there's a strong history of that in the sense of cloud, for example, and just teams building out guardrails for humans to deploy securely.
Yep.
Why not do the same for agents? We live in the world of 2026 and agents and acronyms. Let me throw LLMs and MCPs into this. So MCPs are a way to get agents to do many, many actions. Is there an opportunity for guardrails there? Or how have you seen the adoption of MCPs or tooling around MCPs try to constrain or control agents in any effective way?
Absolutely. I mean, you should absolutely have guardrails around MCP tool access, because
Mhm.
MCPs in some ways are APIs to your underlying applications. I think
Yeah, it's still
that's
an
a very
API.
simple way
Yes.
of like
I think it's very
describing
fair
this.
though, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and I from an agentic perspective, I think there is you should think about the MCP tool access is absolutely important, but in from an agentic perspective, I think you need to look more broader than that. Like, yes, having that MCP tool level authorization, if you will, is
Okay.
important, but at the end of the day, like, what application it's accessing and what privileges the agent should have in that app once it passes the MCP tool level is equally as important. And as we have these conversations with customers, there's multiple patterns that have emerged. Folks will either, from an agent perspective, just because they want to deploy stuff faster, may give its, over permission service account identities,
Yeah.
or inherit the human user that's calling, like, their over provision identities. And as we think about how you should think about your agentic applications and what policies and guardrails you need to put into place, you want to look at those identities to the concept of the human user or the identity that's invoking the agent, create that sort of that blended identity, and look at like what that identity is trying to do in the system, and then have guardrails in place for should that blended identity have that MCP tool level access. And if the answer is yes, then ultimately the authorization is to the backend application, so that blended identity should never have any standing privileges to the backend
Yeah.
application. Salesforce, it could be a data store, Snowflake, what have you. That should be provisioned as and when that blended identity needs, and those permissions should be wiped once the agent's done what it's supposed to do. That way, you have no standing privileges that exist within your, within your ecosystem.
Hmm.
And if the agent tried to do something beyond what the guardrails told it to do, it would never be able to do that because it doesn't have access to the underlying
Yes,
systems.
I'm smiling as you describe that because it's like, do we, as a security team, put all of our time into figuring out in this markdown? Is there something in the natural language that's tricking the agent or telling the agent to do something? Or do we just say you don't have access to this API? It feels so much easier and smarter just to cut off access or allow access where
Yeah.
needed for that matter.
Yeah, it's like it's yeah at that access API level for sure, and then even the backend source. Like even if the tool allows access, again you won't have any. If you don't have any standing privileges, you can be allowed access, but again cannot go beyond the confines of what your roles been defined and
Now,
policies.
is this, in my mind, that I love this approach and it feels straightforward logically. In practice, is it still straight? Where do people stumble with this in the sense of trying to apply that both granular access control to the agents as well as the just-in-time access you're describing?
Yeah.
Is it just like this is like machine accounts that we've been dealing with or human or cloud accounts we've been dealing with? Or is there something special about agents that makes it harder to manage or that the people should be thinking about here?
I think some of the problems are very similar and can be translated from both human and non-human identities here into this ecosystem. I think the volume that you're dealing with is now substantially different from what it was before. But I think the principles, the security principles still apply. Any conversations that we are having always start with like, hey, first discover like what exists within
Common
your
theme,
environment,
yeah.
right? Like you can't really control what you can discover, but once you discover, the next thing you should be doing is like looking at controls in place, like that controls you want to put in place. And here, I think some of the again best security best practices that we've talked about for years still into play. Like look at like what systems are accessing sensitive data or will want to access your sensitive data, and start thinking about the broad sort of guardrails that you can put in place, the controls you can put in place, and then having a tool, again I'm biased here like from P0, but our tool has the capability to show you every sort of tool call and backend resource call we're making. So again a tool that can help you sort of manipulate these policies on the fly, so as you see the agent behaving in certain ways,
Mhm.
you can then go configure and fine tune your policies to ensure they're as granular as you want them to be.
Yeah.
And again, ultimately, you want to protect your enterprise data, right? So
Yeah.
just fine tuning those policies, but starting with discovery, control, and then again, being able to prove what agent had, what was the agent trying to do, what access did it want, how was it granted that access, and again, everything that the compliance teams have wanted forever. So
Yeah.
basically being able to do
And
that.
that's got to be really helpful information because that shows you also, wait, where did this agent come from and why is it talking to here? Because
Absolutely.
both you can discover here is a shadow agent, to use that term,
Yep.
and over here, wait, we didn't think this was sensitive data, but some human went and looked at it and analyzed and like, oh, actually, we now also have our data inventory that's telling us that something new that we didn't learn before.
Yep, exactly,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, you want something that captures all of that information so you can fine tune. It's a learning process. A lot of folks are in various stages of agent
Yeah.
deployment, but again, the fundamentals of security I don't think change. The way you want to handle agentic should, has to be more sort of holistic. And I think in human users and in NHIs, a lot of people live with standing privileges, but in the agentic world, zero standing privileges actually becomes really, really important. And you have to start sort of thinking about it from that lens and using that discover, control, prove model to ensure that you have your agentic sort of story tied down.
Yeah, and I think that sounds like a wonderful guardrail to me. Is that standing, making those ephemeral,
Yep.
and just knowing what's out there. Those are two great messages. And unfortunately, on the theme of ephemeral, we don't have much time to continue the conversation.
Noise.
So I appreciate the messages you've been telling us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to learn more about P0 security, check out securityweekly.com/P0IDV. And for all of our Identiverse 2026 coverage from Cyber Risk Alliance, as my voice is breaking, check out securityweekly.com/IDV. Stick around. We'll be right back after the break.